Michael Smoak, welcome to the Development by David podcast. I'm glad we could make this happen. How are you?
Yeah, man. I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited to be here. Like I said earlier before we started, I really, really appreciate your persistence and my time of chaos of staying on me and getting me on the show. I told you it was something I wanted to do when we started. I just couldn't find the time. So I'm grateful we did, and I'm grateful that you wanted to have me on in the first place. And I'm stoked to chat with you.
Mate, it's awesome. Like, we're doing this transatlantic. You're in the States, I'm in Glasgow, Scotland. It's a weird town whereby you and I can connect thousands of miles apart. It's amazing.
It's so cool. This is a first for me. I don't. I've had people that say like love from Australia in the DMs, but I've never actually spoken to anybody from across the world from me. The farthest I've gotten is Australia, but never like this. So this is a cool first for sure.
How do you take stock of that sentiment that your mission and your message is reaching thousands, if not millions, of people across the world?
Oh man, if I had a answer for that, I'd tell you if I felt like I had that figured out. It's humbling beyond measure, truly. I mean, me and my parents talk about it sometimes about how that is honestly hard to wrap my head around, and it's a blessing. I mean, we what we're doing now is a blessing. The fact that we can talk and communicate to like-minded people from across the world can have a mutual conversation about the things they're interested in is so special, and it's one of the beautiful things about the internet amidst a time when the internet is sort of negative in a lot of ways. So I'm just lucky and I'm happy to be here. Like I'm just happy to have the opportunity to make that kind of impact. There are some days I can't believe that I get to do this. I don't never feel like I have to get to or have to do it. I always feel like I get to do it. And so long as I can keep that mentality, I'm just going to be grateful and humbled to have the opportunity to make an impact on someone 2,000, 3,000, 10,000 miles away.
Michael, it's the 7th of March, 2023, and you pick up the camera for the first time to record your first rant to TikTok. Why did you do that? Why did you pick up the phone?
Oh, man, what a question. If I could put myself back in the moment, it was a boiling point. It was a tipping point. And I've said before, you will not make a change until the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of changing because both are inherently uncomfortable, both suck. If you're not happy with your current state, that's painful. But change is uncomfortable because you're not necessarily competent of how to handle, manage, and adapt to that change. So you're going to learn, you're going to fail, and that is inherently painful. The upside of that is eventually it becomes less painful when it becomes your new reality and not your current state of change. So for me, I spent probably 6 weeks just agonizing over the classic bullshit that everybody tells themselves in their head about why they shouldn't get started creating content or putting themselves out there in any facet. What will they think of me? What if it fails? Those two things, the two lies, which by the way aren't true, they're not thinking about you, and you can't really fail. You'll just get feedback. So once I decided that that was not necessarily plausible, it wasn't real, it was simply my imagination, I just decided to put out my first video. And it came from a place of one extreme passion and realizing that I didn't have anybody in my life that really cared about this stuff the way that I did. And it wasn't that I was mad about that. I'm into health and fitness and longevity to a degree that is a bit unusual to people. And I fully acknowledge that. I have my quirks just like anybody else does. Mine just happens to benefit my body. And it almost, for the first couple months, and still is, was just a cathartic release for me, almost like a journal or a video diary. It was more for me and just putting my passion out there in hopes that it helps just one person than it was to try to grow a page or make an impact, or definitely wasn't about a full-time job. It was about knowing the fitness industry had a huge gap of normal common sense information and knowing that I felt like I had something to say that was simple that changed my life. And once I got over myself, which most people, once they get over themselves, can do just about anything, I decided it was time and I did it. And lo and behold, the third or fourth video I ever made got 1 million views and took me to the first 10,000 followers. And here we are almost 2 years and 1 million people later.
One quote that I love is that you would worry less about what people think of you if you realize how seldom they do. And one person that shared that with you is your father.
Yeah, man. Yeah, he is. I say all the time, if TikTok existed when he was a kid, he'd have twice the following that I do. He is a big reason I am who I am from a core value standpoint. And he's a big reason I love the aphorisms, the quotes, he's spoken to me in quotes and phrases since I was in diapers. And I'm grateful for that because he often was challenging my perspective on life. And it's true. I mean, when you realize everyone is the main character in their own movie and you're just an extra, life becomes a lot more fun to live. Like I look back and I almost become sad at the possibility of what if I would have continued letting everyone's expectation that I imagined in my head of me, if I were to have done that thing, what would my life look like? And it's taught me a lot. It taught me that I spent the majority of the first quarter of my life really, really worried about that, and how I look back on my old self and I'm sad. I take pity on him. I'm like, I wish you would have come to this conclusion sooner, that nobody gives a fuck about you because they're too busy caring about themselves. So do what you want to do. Like, you're gonna die. You're gonna die one day. So yeah, man, the relationship I have with my dad and the aphorisms he speaks to me in have made a huge impact on the way I view the world and even the videos I make.
In a space whereby the internet is so muddied with clickbait and cancel culture and propaganda and everything else in between, what do you think it was about your content that proliferated and lacerated through the noise?
I've thought about this a lot because I've spun the narrative in my head of I'm just a guy who got lucky with the algorithm, but I do think there are tangibles and intangibles that have allowed my content to grow at the rate that it has, both through the podcast, through the TikTok, and even through the Instagram. Um, Number one, I think it's conviction. I have a big belief that I think passion is contagious. I told a story in a video once about a guy I sat next to on a flight back from California who was reading the original Dune, the movie Dune, that the movie's based on a book from the 80s. And I don't know anything about Dune. And he had an original copy. The paper was brown, the book was tattered. And I just asked him what he was reading. And he proceeded to just ooze passion about Dune. And I was captivated and I was interested and I was asking questions. And it's that conviction and passion that I think is the pinnacle of human experience. Like, when you connect with a person, it's through passion, it's through conviction, it's through devotion. I don't even know that I'm convicted about what I speak on. I'm devoted to it because I've seen what it's done for my life. And all I want to do is make people aware of the fact that their health, their vitality is within their control. And it's not in extreme choices, extreme diets, clickbait topics. It's in the basic common sense things that everyone is avoiding. And I think people can feel that. Like, I think that there's an intangible you can feel that if I asked myself and meditated on it greatly the other day, and I know for a fact, if all this were to go away tomorrow, if I lost all the followers, if I had to go back to corporate America, I couldn't coach anymore, I would still do all of this every day. I would still live it every day because I was doing it for 7 years before I ever made a video. So I know what it can do for me, or what it has done for me, and I know what it can do for others. And that's all I want to do. I want to help one person a day, maybe more, but just one at least, understand that their life, their health is within their control. And I think the tangible things are my public speaking skills and my knowledge on the matter. I've spent 6 years honing my public speaking skills, both academically, professionally in the corporate world, and now just on my own through repetition on things like this. And I've spent maybe 1,000 hours researching, absorbing podcasts, reading books, watching YouTube content from people a whole lot smarter than me. And for whatever reason, when it comes to health and fitness knowledge, my mind is a steel trap. But if you tell me you want to grab dinner on a Wednesday night, in one ear, out the other, if I don't write it down. I'm just blessed to have this one thing that my mind has hyperfixated on for almost a decade, and there's no signs of stopping. So those are probably the three things that I would say I've been lucky enough to share with the world that have made the impact that it has.
Michael, to use a fitness analogy, I love the idea that storytelling is like training your bicep. The first time you ever train your bicep, you do 1 to 5 reps. It's agonizing. Your form's wrong. You have no mind muscle connection. And you leave that experience sore and you have to recover. But then you go again and you do 2 sets or you do 10 reps and you're more capable, more confident, more secure, more steady. And over the course of 6 years, for example, you build a beautiful bicep, which is a story, which is conviction, which is purpose and passion. But it doesn't start that way. You have to do the reps. And I think storytelling is the ultimate muscle. And you seem to have developed over the last 6 years.
Thank you, man. It's why that's one of the reasons I love fitness so much, dude. It truly is a microcosm for life. My dad put me in sports at an early age, and from an early age, he said, If you ever don't like this, we don't have to do it. But the main reason I put you in it is because sports is a microcosm for life. It teaches you how to win, it teaches you how to lose, it teaches you how to work as a team, and it teaches you how to pursue something for a long period of time to become better at it. And training is a microcosm for life in the way that you start at it and you suck and it hurts. And it doesn't get easier. You just get stronger. You just get more resilient. You become better prepared. And ultimately, the physique is a byproduct, like you said. It's a great analogy. It's your physique is a story. My body is a story of 7 years of consistency, of pushing myself, of going when I didn't want to go. And that confidence, that narrative that you build throughout building your body, it just bleeds into every facet of your life. And if more people realize that, if you don't know where to start, this is a big question I get a lot. I just don't know which way to go. I don't know where to start with my job, my life, my career. Start with yourself. Develop yourself relentlessly, and the path will become more clear. And start with your physical body. It's the most direct, most straightforward thing that most people are neglecting. And if you train it, it grows stronger, it grows more appealing, it grows better looking. And your storytelling, like you alluded to, public speaking skills, these are all muscles too. And if you train them, they become stronger, they become more appealing, they become more noticeable, just like a physique when you walk into a room that you've built over the last 5 years. So that has been the most powerful lesson I've learned. It's taught me I can start anything and I don't care that I suck at it, because I sucked at training at one point and now I make my life on telling people how to do it. So I just know I put my ego to the side, and if I just keep showing up, I can learn any skill. It's a muscle I can train, just like you said with storytelling.
Why is it important to build a strong, robust physique? What signals does that give?
Oh man, this can go back to my why. This can go back to physical health, and I apologize if I in advance probably should have said this at the beginning. If I have to stop to cough a little bit or I sound a little bit nasally to you or to those listening, I'm battling a wicked chest cold. I feel a little bit under the weather. But there was no way I was rescheduling on you. No way. I would do this if I had 110-degree fever. Um, I mean, the answer to that question is how long do you have? Because I could go all day. It starts with the obvious thing for me, which is physical health and self-confidence. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you say. I don't care what you think you believe about yourself or the world around you. If you carry 50 pounds of body fat or more year round, if you have 30 pounds to lose, and you lose it, you are going to move through the world differently. You are going to act differently. You're going to carry yourself differently. People are going to treat you differently. That skinny privilege thing that people make jokes about, it's real. People treated me differently when I was fat and goofy looking than they do now being physically fit. So if what I believe to be true is true, which is a great quote from Dr. Joe Dispenza, which is your personality creates your personal reality. The way that I move through the world is part of my personality. My physique is part of my personality because it influences my thoughts, my actions, and my belief about myself and the world around me. And those three things make up the personality as we know it. So if you lose 50 pounds, you are going to be more confident, just like I was when I lost 50 pounds. I achieved something. So I built confidence in myself that I could stick to something for a long time, that I could overcome adversities when I didn't know how to work out. I didn't know how to eat. I didn't know what to eat or when to eat. Doesn't matter much. We can maybe get into that later. The point is, the list is endless. But for me, the biggest things are it changed the way that I view myself, coming from a guy who struggled with self confidence and self image from as early as I can remember, like literally at an age where no kid should have any business worrying about their body. I was worried about my body, and I'm not anymore, at least not to the degree I was. Everybody battles with it a little bit. It enabled and opened doors and opportunities for me that otherwise wouldn't have been there. I don't know. I know that most of my content is talking head, but I don't know that my social media fame would have, or say, fame career would have been to the degree it was if I didn't have the physique as a credential to support it. So it opened the door for me to different things. It opened me to different people in my personal life. And ultimately, the biggest thing is it's about my why. For me, I think you need to have a strong body to be prepared for life, for potential sickness, for adversities. I think if you can do hard things through building your body, through cold exposure, heat exposure, just things that are generally challenging, you can better equip yourself for life's non elected challenges. Andrew Huberman has a great quote that says, we should do self elected hard things so that when life's non elected challenges arise, we can say, I don't know how I'm going to get through this, but I know that I can do hard things. And building my physique was a hard thing. I think That's what it ultimately boils down to for me. I could get into the healthcare side, but everybody knows if you're not carrying excess body fat and you have above average muscle, the odds of you living a longer, healthier, disease free life go way up. So I'll spare the science on that one, but it's a list as long as a CVS receipt, which you might not get being not from America, but my American listeners will understand. CVS prints unnecessarily long receipts for the stuff that you buy. So it's an endless list, man. There's nothing but pros to it.
Are there any consequences of embarking on a path of self improvement?
Positive or negative consequences? There's both, right?
Negative. Perceived negatives.
Yeah, perceived negatives. I think that's an important distinction. I had a 22-year-old reach out to me and say, I feel like as I develop myself, my friends, my peers are starting to treat me differently in a negative light because I don't want to go out and drink and smoke and sit on the couch hungover all day like all my college friends do. That happened to me. When I became adamant about my health and was doing things, I was intermittent fasting in 2017 before it was very mainstream, and now everybody knows what it is. But back then, my friends were like, "What the fuck is wrong with you? Why don't you eat breakfast? Like, what are you anorexic? Do you have an eating disorder?" I didn't. I was just using it to manage my calories. But it led to my friends at the time poking fun at me, making jabs that sometimes hurt. Ultimately, what it boiled down to was an old part of me had to die to become who I am now. And that will happen multiple times in life. In order to become the new version of yourself, an old part of your identity has to die. The part of me that thought it was okay to go get hammered drunk and then eat late night diner food 3 or 4 nights a week had to die. Now, I might still do that occasionally, but it's a couple times a year, not 3 times a week. So when you do that, you are going to start to outgrow people as a possibility. You're going to start to outgrow parts of your current reality. And that feels painful. And it's very hard to accept that, like, this is for a good reason later down the road, especially if you're a kid, because your foresight's just not that good. The way that I view the world at 21 versus the way I view the world at 27, not that I have it all figured out, but a lot has happened to me in that 6 years. And I understand now when I go through things like that, it's a part of me dying that is ultimately going to benefit the current me. And if you can just cling to that and continue to develop yourself, the right people, the right events, the right community is going to reconvene into your life. And it might be the same people that get their shit together. It might be new people altogether. Either way, it'll be for the best. But there's a great quote that says your new life is going to cost you your old one. And that's the simplest way to put it. And for a lot of people, that can be really, really scary. But at the end of the day, it is better. You just have to tell yourself, this is going to get better. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it's going to get better. But I remember at the time feeling in a lot of pain about that. Like, why don't my friends like me the way they used to? Why do they say all this shit to me now? And it's because I was changing and because maybe my desire, my hunger for self improvement brought about things in them or revealed things to them that they didn't like. Stephen Bartlett, the host of Diary of a CEO, said something once that stuck with me. He said, your self-improvement will hold a mirror up to everyone around you and show them where they are and where they are not. And that will manifest differently for people. In some people, it will manifest itself as action. In some people, it will manifest itself as projection. In some people, it will manifest itself as hostility towards you. But at the end of the day, if you're pursuing the best version of yourself and you're not doing anything with malicious intent, how they respond is not on you. All you can do is control your reality.
There's a common theme around identity in your answer. I think about how you have to become somewhat of a self improvement chameleon to begin with. You have to live in a way or live in accordance to things that you haven't achieved yet. I kind of think of Hermose's lonely chapter analogy. I have a very
Mm.
similar analogy called like the self improvement mote of loneliness, where your old tribe have forgotten about you. They've kind of agreed or accepted that you're on to pastures new, but your new tribe, the kind of high aspiration, accomplished, successful people that you're trying to, I guess, ascribe yourself with, don't really know you exist yet. So you kind of exist in this moat in between two camps, and you're trying to morph your identity. You're trying to, again, act in accordance to things that you haven't achieved yet. In that lonely chapter, or in that that self improvement kind of social mote of loneliness, How do you stay true to this new formed identity? How do you mitigate yourself from going back to the old tribe and the old habits?
What a great question, and what a great analogy. I love that analogy from Hormozy, and I think it's important to distinguish that for many of you listening to this, you might not have experienced it yet. You might have already experienced it, and you might be in it. That lonely chapter could be different units of time for everybody. It could be a week, it could be a month, it could be a year. And you can't compare your journey and your story to anyone else's other than your own. But a quote my father's been saying to me a lot when we talk about my career and how quickly everything's changed for me in the last 18 months, it always comes back to him saying, I think it's a Shakespeare quote, above all, to thy own self be true. And no matter what, at the end of the day, if I lay my head on the pillow and I feel good about what I did and I feel happy and fulfilled in what I did, no person, no circumstance, no place is going to take that from me. And I know that I'll find my people, place, and circumstances eventually. I also think it's important to place a degree of intentionality on putting yourself in potential environments where you can find the new group. Your old tribe has left you, that's fine. But your old tribe isn't just going to trip over you walking down the street. You have to put some intention to finding them. So for me, in this chapter of life I entered about 6 months ago, leaving a long-term relationship, losing a friend group as a result, moving out of my house at the time, having my entire life uprooted, I had to put myself out there. I had to go to networking events alone. I joined a run club. I joined a few run clubs because running aligned with my lifestyle. So I thought, well, that makes sense. I'm probably going to find people like me there. Lo and behold, I've got 30 people I could call in a jam right now that I know would help me out. And that wouldn't have happened had I not made the effort and attempt to put myself with like-minded people. So the final answer to that question, I guess, boils down to above all, to thy own self be true. If you truly feel good about what you're doing and like what you're doing is really serving you and filling you up, then you should not compromise because anything else would be a disgrace to you, to the people that care about you and respect you, and the people that will care about you and respect you one day. But ultimately to you. You know, that voice in your head, that's the person you spend the most time with. Try not to lose that person's respect. I love that Mark Manson quote. Always be following that inner voice and be true to yourself. And if you put yourself out there, you might be surprised. You might find a group of best friends like I did. And if it's not working, you just keep stepping on the next stone. You just keep moving forward. And I promise you, it will work out. It might be 30 days, it might be 180, it might be a year, but you have to keep going with the anticipation of tomorrow it's going to work out. And if it doesn't, that's all right, because maybe tomorrow it will. That's truly how I've viewed my life the last 6 months. And it's been very helpful in getting me through some tough days in my lonely period, even.
Self-esteem is the reputation you have with yourself. I love it.
Fantastic way to put it. Wow. That's great.
For those who have a negative inner monologue, are there any daily habits that you could recommend to change that noisy roommate, as per se?
Oh my gosh. Yes, yes. And the great news is it's not an overwhelming list. That's what I try to do above all else. Is like what are the key things? When you really boil it down, you take a reductionist approach to things. I really try to have a reductionist approach to my life, which is when I really boil something down to its essence, what really fucking matters. And for me, it's 4 or 5 key decisions that I think everyone can make every day to put their life in a particular direction, either forward or backwards, depending on what you're trying to achieve. And I talk about my morning routine a lot. I talk about the basics. It's not an insane morning routine, but one of them is a routine. It's a basic routine for me. It's water, light, movement, mindfulness. And that sounds like 5 things already. It's really one routine. It takes 20 minutes. I drink some water, I go for a walk, I get morning sunlight on my eyes, and I spend time with God. I pray. If you're not a religious person listening to this, meditate, sit with yourself, sit with your thoughts and your internal dialogue before you get on the fucking phone and doom scroll. But for me, and really for everybody, from a neurological standpoint, we are creatures of habit and routine. And we receive a positive feedback loop, a dopamine loop from sticking to routine and regimen. So start there. Start with the first part of your day. If you can win the first part of your day, the rest of the day becomes easier and you can establish a locomotion of good choices. You can carry that momentum. But it's the absolute basics of a morning routine, making my bed, moving my body every day, and 80 to 90% of the food that I eat coming from the earth. Grew in the ground, grew on a tree, had a mom and dad. If I do those things every day and I didn't know what else to do in my life, everything else was a shit show, hitting the fan, my inner monologue would improve. How do I know that? Because it did, because I've lived it for 7 years. So if you're having a negative internal monologue, maybe it's because you haven't given yourself a lot of proof, a lot of evidence to talk to yourself otherwise. But if you can do something like that for 30 days, wake up and make your bed and go for a walk and hydrate and journal, meditate, pray, walk all day throughout the day, go to the gym a couple times a week, you're not going to have a choice but for the inner monologue to change, because the inner monologue won't make sense anymore. It won't make sense to self-deprecate because your actions don't align. Your outer world is no longer aligning with your inner world, and your inner world is changing through your actions. So start with the absolute foundation. Like, what are the basic fucking things I can do? I could probably walk. I could probably eat a vegetable. Probably go to the gym twice, considering I don't go at all. And repeat that process and let the osmosis of good choices start to slowly just mold you and change you. And if you can do that for 30 days, I launched a 28 one-day challenge. I think it was 28, a 28-day challenge last year. And I had a guy reach out to me today, or excuse me, day before yesterday, and say, "Hey man, I want you to know that 28-day challenge you launched last May catapulted me into this 75-pound weight loss a year later." All because he made the decision to do something for 28 days and he never went back. So if you want to change your inner monologue, change your actions and then be intentional about how you talk to yourself while you carry out those actions. It really comes down to where you place your intention and your attention.
Are there any environmental factors surrounding that?
Oh my gosh. Yes. One of the biggest ones for me, I'll admit, I'm the first one to try to say I might be a talking head on the internet that talks about getting your life together. That should not give you the indication that I have my fucking shit together. Okay. I have issues. I have struggles. I have things that I deal with that are a mess at times. And honestly, one of the things that I've struggled with since I was a little kid is cleanliness. Like, I'm not food or anything, but like, I'm one to put my laundry on the corner of the bed and leave it there a few days too long. Uh, I'm one to throw a pair of shorts in the corner and not at the hamper. Stupid shit. And I realized one of my good friends, Will, is a very, very clean guy. Like, almost his bedroom looks like an IKEA set. It's really unbelievable. Hey, do y'all have IKEA in Scotland?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. I don't want to make too many references that are over your head because of a geolocation thing. Um, like earlier when you said you're proper blurry, I went, I don't know what that means. But the he said something to me, and he probably has no idea because it was such an insignificant thing in the moment. His car is spotless, and he had like one small gum wrapper and a water bottle that was full, and he had gotten it out of the car immediately. And I was like, "Why?" We were like, he was like cleaning it and looking through his car, and I was like, "Dude, we're in a hurry. We got to go. Like, why are you bothering this?" And he just looks up at me and he goes, "The smaller messes, cleaning up the smaller messes keeps the bigger messes from accumulating." And I was like, "Oh yeah, duh. Every big mess starts out as a small mess." And that big mess can accumulate into my life. Like, my mind feels busier and cluttered when my room is not clean. When my bold, it's really a lot to call this a podcast studio. It's not. But when my podcasting area is cluttered, my mind is cluttered, my life is cluttered. So, yeah, dude, for me, like, keeping my spaces clean has been a huge environmental factor for my creativity, and also setting up my environment to facilitate the life that I want to live. I know you've read Atomic Habits. You know about, if you want to increase more of a habit, you need to reduce the barriers or the friction between you and that thing. And if you want to decrease a bad habit, you need to increase the barriers or friction. So, like, right over here to my left, I've got my whiteboard with my 2025 goals that I'm writing on right now, and I'm touching it. It's within arm's reach. My office is set up. My podcast lighting just stays set up so I can just turn it on and go. Obviously, my TikToks just require me opening my phone. My gym is 10 minutes away. My shoes are always right at the foot of my bed. So, like, there's not any friction or barriers between me and the things I want to do. And I've created my environment intentionally for that. So if somebody wants to go to the gym and they're trying to drive to a gym 30 minutes away, 45 minutes away, they might be better to just get some home equipment. It's better than not going to the gym because it's too far. If you want to walk more in the morning, you're better off just putting your shoes and shorts out at the night before. So you don't really have an opportunity or an excuse to not go. So yeah, the environment, man, it plays a huge, huge role. Now, have you seen that? I mean, looking at you're in a legit podcast set, like what has environment done for you? I'm curious because you've got this elaborate dope setup that I want to have one day. And I've got what looks like a hostage negotiation room.
Well, again, I think the standards that you uphold need to proliferate all domains of your life. For example, I do have a microphone at home. I'm in a studio today because I want to make a good first impression. If we were doing this face to face, I would have brushed my teeth and I would have worn my best suit. But in this digital ecosystem, the best I can do is have some good lighting and a nice camera. And similar to what you were talking about when it comes to upholding your physical physique, if you are creating content, how the set looks, the lighting, the cameras, that all has subtle and unconscious and subconscious behavioral psychology that underpins how worthy am I as a podcast host. I could have the best guest, but if I'm recording in 10, like, I don't know, like 180p or 480p, then the first impression is going to be that I don't care, I'm not dedicated to quality, and there's no perceived level of effort. So for me, sweating the small stuff really matters. And similarly, I have moments whereby I'll forget to brush my teeth before I go to sleep, or I will leave dirty shoes on the hallway, for example. We're all human, we all do that. But when you have people in your life that can uphold level of quality that is aspiring, I find that quite useful. For example, I grew up with a very militant dad. My dad was a veteran, and regardless if he was going to the supermarket or across the shop, on the same street, or walking the dog or taking the bins out, he would always like iron his shirt. And having someone in my life that upholds that level of subtle intentionality to quality has been really important. And sometimes you don't need to actually seek that in someone else. You often see that quote around, you're the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. And that gives a subliminal message that you need to renounce your tribe and seek excellence elsewhere. But what you can do is actually become the leader of that excellence and uphold the standard for those around you. And if you become benevolent in that way, whereby your friends and community uplift their standards and you now have a uniformed level of excellence, I think that can be just as potent as like ditching the tribe to find a new formed sense of excellence elsewhere. I don't think you need to outsource your level of excellence. You can actually be the leader of that standard, and then that community around you upholds it too.
Wow. Dude, I've never thought about that. I obviously have heard you are the sum of the 5 people comparison or analogy, but I've never thought about the principle, and maybe people do it unconsciously or I've done it unconsciously, but the principle of rather than renounce the tribe, just step up and lead by example. I have had people in my old friend group. I had a guy who I really sort of lost touch with. Um, we share a couple of group messages from high school. We've been friends since we were in 8th grade. We're just not close anymore. And we've gotten closer recently. I gave a talk here in Atlanta in person as sort of an event where I gave a speech on purpose and how getting in the best shape of your life empowers your life's purpose. And I probably hadn't spoken to him one on one in a couple of years. And I get to the event and I show up and he's sitting front row with a journal open. And he's like losing weight, he's getting right. And you never know who's watching if you just continue to lead by example. So that's a really great point. Like if you just step up and be the leader through your actions benevolently, benevolently rather, you'd be amazed at the impact you make on people. You just never know. It's a great point. I also really like what you said about um, sweating the small stuff a little bit. I had it's funny you use the analogy brushing your teeth. I was in my room last night brushing my teeth, and this is like where I get ideas for content. It literally just feels like a lightning bolt strikes at the top of my head and I got to make a video. And I saved it as a draft, but I was sitting there brushing my teeth, thinking about the fact that I don't have dental insurance because I'm self-employed and I haven't gotten a policy yet. I'm working on that. And I'm sitting there brushing my teeth and I immediately, my brain just goes to, imagine if I didn't do this. Like I care a lot about my teeth, and imagine if I just started brushing my teeth like 3 times a week and then I get a cavity. What's the real investment of time to prevent that pain in the ass outcome? Like people, you go to the dentist, you get a cavity, you got to have it filled. It's painful, it's sore. It might hurt for weeks before you decide to go to the dentist. It might hurt a little bit after, and then you got to be extra careful following getting the cavity filled. And all you would have had to do is devote 2 minutes in the morning and 2 minutes in the evening, 4 minutes out of your day, and maybe a minute each on either side to floss. And you wouldn't have gotten the cavity. And that's an analogy for the people who look up and they've gained 50 pounds, or they look up and they've got a chronic health diagnosis as a result of their choices. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's the small choices you make every single day that that propel you in the right or wrong direction. So when we say like sweat the small stuff, I'm not saying everybody listening to this needs to worry about optimal protein timing. I'm saying like sweat the small stuff that is also kind of the big stuff. Brushing your teeth, keeping your room clean, walking, like a 10-minute walk in its isolation throughout in one part of your day is a small thing. But a 10-minute walk every day for 5 years is a very, very big thing. So the small things really become the big things. Man, I love that analogy. I also love that you had a dad that instilled that foundation in you, and it's very clear that that comes from a place that's very intrinsically motivated for you, given your background and how you've come up. It's cool to hear.
I love that kind of third order effect whereby, for example, if you're presented with the opportunity to take the lift or the elevator, we call it a lift here in the UK, the elevator or the stairs from a young age, the first order effect is that taking the stairs is more uncomfortable, probably takes a little bit longer. You have to dispose of more energy in that process. But the second order effect is cumulatively over the course of a year, 2 years, you will have combined 10,000 extra steps or 100,000 extra steps or however many feet of elevation, which means you'll have burnt more calories. But the third order effect is that over a prolonged period of time, you've hardwired your brain to pick the hard decision when there was an easier, more instantly gratifying option available. So that third order effect, that kind of mindset shift, actually translates into broader habits later down in your life. And I can imagine things such as brushing your teeth, or not brushing your teeth, like flossing, for example, or doing whitening your teeth, for example. Sweating the small stuff in the instant will allow you to look for opportunities and the delayed term, for example. Like I think if you are hyper focused on the marginalized gains now, when opportunities present themselves in the future, you will not be blind to them because you're able to find the little 1% gains. It's like you are presented with more lottery tickets in the future, or you're able to spot the winning lottery tickets. But if you're in the process or in the habit of not sweating the small stuff now and not looking for those little gold rushes and gold mines, then you will be blind to them in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's like I think the stat is like 10,000 steps a day is equivalent to like 70 or I think it's like 70 marathons or some stat. Basically the point being like that decision to do something every day accumulates. And that's that's what the foundation of my message, my coaching, the clients that I work with, that's what I build the message upon. Something clicked in me, and it's like everybody's heard the quote that consistently good will always beat occasionally great, but a lot of people hear it and they just keep scrolling or they just keep going on about their life. And for whatever reason, one day something clicked in me where I went, duh, of course it's better. Of course it's fucking better to take a 30-minute walk if that's all you got in the tank or that's all you got time for, because a 30-minute walk done at every single opportunity you didn't have a lot of time over the next 5 years attributes to 100 miles that you wouldn't have otherwise walked, 10,000 calories burned that you wouldn't have burned. And most importantly, solidification of the habit that you said you wanted to build when you set out to do this thing, that is develop a better physique. Because the principle of solidifying the habit is oftentimes more important than the action we take to solidify the habit. Walking, training, running, it doesn't matter. It's the principle of moving your body when you might not want to or might not have time. You're more likely to do that thing later when you do have more time and even get more out of it because you made the decision. And incrementally over time, even if you only had 10 minutes, you only had 5 minutes, it doesn't matter. There is no amount of time that can make an action that could serve you positively in the future insignificant. There's no amount of time. I don't care if it's 60 seconds, walk for 60 seconds. I don't care. Like that's really how I view life and embodying getting 1% better, because I've seen like that's basically why I have the physique and the brand is, and I don't say that arrogantly. I say that to say like I've built a physique I'm proud of. I've built a brand I'm proud of, but it's from sweating the little things. It's from not missing a post. It's from never missing my 3-day workouts. Could I have made more gains on a 5-day split? Maybe. I don't give a shit because I was 100% compliant with 3 days. I would have been 50% compliant with 5. So I wouldn't have gotten as good of results. Compliance is truly the science. And if people can find what they comply to best, they will see the most gain in their life.
Do you think there's a hamstring or a tendency for people not to realize that the actions that they cash in now, or the actions that they partake in now, I think people struggle to understand that a future version of them will benefit from them. Like you have the choice to either give your future self a gift or give your future self a debt. And I don't think people are able to like really
Yeah.
personify that what they do now will impact a future version of themselves. Do you have any tips or tricks whereby I guess it goes back to that kind of cavity analogy that you used earlier, but do you have any tips or tricks whereby if a person right now can personify the future consequences of their current actions?
It's such an abstract concept for people who don't fully understand it yet. You and I understand the payoff of doing those things that you can't necessarily see how your future self benefits from it immediately. You can't do one workout and see your body grow or get more fit. Can't go on one run and see your first marathon being completed. You can't record one podcast and expect to have a nationally ranked podcast. So you don't know. And I think James Clear talks about in his book that human beings operate better off of fear of potential negative outcome than possibility of realized positive gain. So it's easy for me to say like, well, you will lose 50 pounds in 6 months, but it's hard for me to adhere to that if I'm a beginner. But it's also very easy for me to say if you don't lose 50 pounds in 6 months, you've got to donate. This is something I did with a client. You've got to donate $5,000 to whatever political party you oppose. That lit the fire under his ass. So my advice would be if you can't use potential positive outcome or potential positive gain as a motivator, I get it. That's not for everybody. Use potential negative consequence. If I don't lose 25 pounds, I've got to run a half marathon. For some people, they'd rather run in traffic than run a half marathon. So pick something that like scares you a little bit. That if I don't do X, then I have to do Y, and I really don't want to do Y. And that works. That truly works. And then who knows, you might be so militant in sticking to that thing that negative consequence you signed up for, the race or what have you, might just be a goal. It might turn into a goal. But that has worked for coaching clients that I've worked with in the past, and obviously it works for James Clear, which means it can work for just about anybody.
I do agree that we have more activation when we are scared from the stick opposed to running towards a carrot. I think a really powerful tool is like maps versus terrain personification. If you can, for example, one thing that I used to do during lockdown was when I was struggling quite mentally because of isolation and being locked up during the pandemic, I was staying with my dad at the time, who's a war veteran. And I would often either go down and ask him to tell me like a war horror story, for example. Uh, Tell me about a time where he had to sleep in a trench and had to steal boots off like a dead opponent to keep himself warm at night. Or I would go a
Whoa.
run down the beach. I'd either do that or go like a run down the beach, whereby there was often elderly people or disabled people out for like a leisurely stroll or out for a visit. And just seeing like those two perspectives, hearing a war story or seeing someone who was maybe immobile, um, gave me a newfound level of gratitude of where I am right now. And that gave me such activation energy to then achieve my goals because it realized the possibility of achieving it because I have all of the surroundings, environment, and capability and body to do that. And just again, leaning into that terrain level of gratitude helped me overcome that.
Yeah, man, I would argue what that gave you above all else was perspective. Perspective is one of the most incredible things a human being can be gifted with. I've heard many of people or seen many of people post on social media, someone in a hospital bed is praying for the opportunities that you have right now. I mean, I truly view fitness sometimes, and really all the opportunities I have in my life is like, how dare I squander this? How dare I squander this able body by filling it with garbage and treating it like shit? You don't have a spare one just hanging up. It's the one you get. So that's those stories about your dad. They grant perspective. I mean, I would much rather struggle through my workday than have to do what your father had to do serving in the military. Like that, that's enough to give me gratitude. Like you said, that terrain to be in gratitude, to really feel the gratitude, is so powerful. And I'm obviously experiencing that now with having a sick family member to the degree that I do. That it's just like I never, through my own control and accord, I would be doing myself a massive disservice to the people that cared about me if I didn't make the most of my life and my body and my finances, everything. It's given me massive perspective. And that a lot of times, if people can't get to where they say they want to go, I think they lack perspective. And it sounds like your dad did a good job of instilling that in you. Honestly, kudos for you to being enough of a self starter to say, like, hey, dad, tell me something kind of fucked up so I get off my ass. Like, it's a hell of a strategy.
I once heard John Jones say, "If God gave me the gift that I can, I must do it for those who can't."
Mm, it's freaking great. God, that's
It's
freaking great.
awesome.
That's so powerful, man. I mean, I truly, I can't, I get angry sometimes. Like, I really do. I get angry because I view not seizing the gift of a healthy, able body as one of the most selfish things that you can do. And most people, obviously, there are people who aren't able bodied. Most people have that gift. They have the gift of a body that can walk, talk, feed itself, cook for itself, go to the gym. And the reason I believe it's selfish is transparently, I grew up in a family where nobody, really one person, my mom now, but really nobody has ever placed utmost importance on their physical health. And you can see it in my family if you look. And the reason I consider it selfish is like you've got all these people that love you and all these people that depend on you. And you're putting yourself at risk that one day you're going to have a problem that affects all of them emotionally, sometimes their day to day lives, through your actions and through your choices. It's the quote I heard from Aubrey Marcus for the first time that rings in my head every day. Everybody has a laundry list of problems until they have a health problem. And then there's one problem. And I see it now every day in my life. I see it all across the internet in the world, and I will see probably more of it in my family. So truly, how dare you be selfish enough to squander the one body that you get? It is your gift, and you deserve, or you are really called and required to do it for those who can't. Because there are so many people who I know would trade places with you, David, with me, to be able to do these things that we do. And I think about that shit when I was mile 30 deep at the ultra marathon and I literally couldn't move my legs. I was like, I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky that I get to feel this pain because somebody would do anything to feel that. And I've talked to people who would do anything. I had a guy in my comments say I have ALS and I lost the ability to walk and I would give anything to just go for a walk with my kids again. It's like, yeah, I owe it to that guy to do fucking marathons. That's truly how I feel.
Given that we're two able-bodied white guys talking about self-development on a podcast, do you think there's a
Does it get more cliche than that? Does not get more cliche than that.
but do you think there's an attack against people that preach the messages that maybe you do at the moment? Do you think there's an attack against the self-improvement community?
It's such a tough question to answer. Um, because you have people in the that I would say lump themselves in the self-improvement community. A few creators come to mind that are actually I would call a cancer to social media, but they hide under the guise of self-development. And they present a message and a narrative that self-development is isolate, go monk mode, be miserable until you're not. Well, that doesn't make any fucking sense. If I'm miserable on the path of self-development, I'm not getting that much better, am I? And if the process of self development, the ultimate goal is fulfillment, confidence, and happiness, then I need to do things that fulfill me, make me confident, make me happy along the way so I know what that looks like. So for me, is there an attack on guys like you or guys like me where I understand the importance of giving yourself grace and also being proud of how far you've come and never always reaching for the next thing, but sometimes taking a step back to say, like, look at how far I've come. This is incredible, but also riding the balance of, all right, what's next? What can I push myself to do next? What am I going to learn in the next challenge? That is self-development to me. It's not changing the way you look, think, or act from a place of self-loathing. It's changing the way you look, think, or act because you truly care for, love, and respect yourself. And I think if anybody attacks that narrative, if it's spun ethically and with integrity, that's a reflection of them, not me. And that's a pure projection, of which there is plenty. And if they're projecting, that's fine. I said something that you don't like about yourself. I brought out something you don't like about yourself. And one day you'll either get it together or you won't. But if you're ever ready to get it together, I'll be here and I'll be ready to help you with open arms when you are.
Do you have a framework or an ideology surrounding regret minimization? On this pursuit of self improvement, there might be sacrifices that you might make. There might be routine whereby there's no spontaneity in your life. Do you think there's a version of you 80 years down the line that wish they went to more bars to meet more random people or cheated on their diet in Italy to have a pizza and enjoy the moment with someone else? Do you think there's an element whereby your biggest constraint is your habits and your routine?
No, I don't. This reminds me of when people ask me when I give some sort of informational video or video around my habits, I get the, yeah, but how do you cut loose? And my brain just goes to, this is how I cut loose. I'm walking in my purpose. I'm doing what I feel like I was put here to do. This makes me happy. Going for a run with my friends on a Saturday morning and putting down 10 miles makes me happy. But also, I don't think there has to be this binary 0-1 relationship to things like you just mentioned that the average person perceives as fun to do constantly because I believe they're trying to fill a void in their life that could be filled through true fulfillment and purpose. But that's a different conversation. And doing the hard things. I adhere to my routine relentlessly. I'm on High Rocks prep relentlessly right now. Well, maybe not right now because I'm very sick and I'm currently 20 hours into a 72-hour fast. We can talk about that if you want. But I also went out 3 nights last week. Now I didn't get hammered. I didn't get pissed, as I think that you guys call it. Um, and I didn't eat a cheeseburger every night either. But I went out. I was in a bar. I was having a soda water or a beer, and I was talking to my friends, sober, enjoying the moment, being around people that were doing the same thing, and not judging them, but truly just enjoying myself. So I think one of the biggest mistakes people can make is thinking that self improvement and self development has to be binary. I love my life and I will have the pizza and I will have the cocktail or 5 occasionally. The difference is the frequency and the duration. It went from 4-day benders to 1 day once a month. And if you cut down to that frequency, I promise you're going to look and feel better. And if you are going out like that, if you are cheating on your diet constantly, if you are at the bars getting hammered every weekend, Friday through Saturday or Thursday through Saturday, what are you really trying to compensate for? What are you really looking for? What are you trying to fill? We're all just creatures chasing dopamine and purpose. And through purpose comes dopamine. Through community comes serotonin. We're chasing feelings. And when people embody and wrap themselves up in drugs, alcohol, vices, addiction, they're chasing that feeling. They're just taking what I believe is the wrong road to get there. In reality, it comes from the things that we're doing, that we're talking about here. It comes from pushing yourself. It comes from seeing what your body's capable of. It comes from cultivating and fostering community. For me, it's come from walking in my faith a little bit more and learning more about God. It's not, I get that's not for everybody, but it's worked really well for me. Uh, that's my take, man. I think it really comes down to living in the gray area, but knowing when to go more to the black and more to the white.
What's the difference between earning your dopamine and buying your dopamine?
Great question. Oh, man, I love this. To earn something means you have to put in the work to gain it. I'm not sure if that's Merriam-Webster's definition, but that's definitely the definition I would give it. If I earn anything, I had to put there was some sort of exchange of energy there. If I earned money, I exchanged some sort of good, service, or energy to do that. So if I earn my dopamine, I have to exchange energy for that. But if I'm buying cheap dopamine, I don't really have to do a whole lot to get that. So earning your dopamine, or type 2 fun, as David Goggins calls it, is doing something that maybe sucks in the moment, but you look back and go, that was really awesome. I had the incredible opportunity to visit southern Chile, Patagonia, the bottom of the earth, as close as you can get to Antarctica, with 3 of my best friends. And we hiked what's called the W Trek. There's 2 treks, the W and the O. The W is about 55 miles of trek, and you're supposed to do it over 5 days. We did it in 3 with 40-pound packs on our back. And there were times when it really, really, really sucked and it was painful and my legs were tired. We had to give each other some really open, honest pep talks. But there was no feeling like walking into the hostel right at sundown and getting a cold beer and a hot meal and being like, man, that was fucking awesome. But in the moment, it sucks. But the dopamine you get from that is so much more fulfilling and sustained, even. It lasts longer. I get jacked up when I think about the trip, and we took it 7 months, 8 months ago. So cheap dopamine looks like scrolling for an hour and a half, where you do it so long and it feels good, but then eventually it actually starts to hurt. Your brain actually starts to create a mild pain response when you've doom scrolled, as they call it, for too long. And then you feel like, I've got to go do something else, or you keep doing it and you spiral into anxiety and depression, which most chronic social media users struggle with. So for me, earning my dopamine is a non negotiable every day. And the basic things I do to get there are cold water immersion every day. Well, not every day right now. My cold plunge just broke, but that's a different story. Cold water immersion every day, training or moving my body in some capacity every day, and actually placing barriers and boundaries on my social media usage so I can control that and pour into other things like journaling or reading my Bible or what have you. That's what earning dopamine looks like. It sucks in the now, but when you look back, you're really glad you did it.
Not that I ascribe myself to this person, but Andrew Tate said, no, having things isn't fun, getting things is fun. And as much as I disagree with most of his sentiments online, that was one that really stuck with me. And I look at the results of those who have won the lottery, and most of them squander the money within 12 to 18 months. And it's because they haven't had to endure anything to obtain it. Therefore, the intrinsic value of it is nil, it's zero. Yet, if they
Yeah,
were to build a successful business and exit it for the same amount, they would probably not squander it because of the sweat equity that they've invested, the pain capital that has been employed.
it's so true. It's so true. It's funny. Bold move mentioning Andrew Tate on your podcast. Someone's going to clip you saying his name and then something on this podcast that makes it sound like you're a red pillar. It's going to be funny. No, I'm just kidding.
It's the only thing that's stuck.
I get it, dude. I get it. I think that Tate has takes on that, and because one thing you can't deny about Andrew Tate is that he's pursued an extraordinary period of amount of wealth, so he can speak to what it's like. And having the Ferrari isn't fun. The pursuit of the Ferrari is fun, and that's actually the physiological mechanism behind dopamine. Dopamine people call like the feel good neurotransmitter. Dopamine is actually the neurotransmitter of pursuit and motivation. When you're in pursuit of a goal, when you stick to that routine, making your bed, you get dopamine from the principle of staying in pursuit of something. And if people are lacking purpose and direction, it's probably because they're not chasing the thing, which means they're not getting enough dopamine, which means they feel fucking depressed. So it is truly getting the thing that feels better, truly pursuing the thing that feels better than getting the thing. And I love that sentiment. I love that take. And I've seen this with some of the material purchases I've had or I've gotten in the last year. I bought myself a new car. I bought myself a nice watch last Christmas to build a sentiment around like this was a symbol for the fact that I bought this with money that was earned from me taking a chance on myself. And every time I look at it, I think of that. But like the actual purchase of the thing, like I don't even remember. Getting the thing wasn't special. It was everything I did leading up to and what it means to me that is special. So, what a great analogy. People need to put in sweat equity every single day, even if it's just a little bit of sweat equity, and they'll just live a better life. It's like it really comes down to fulfillment. Like what fills your cup? And for me, it's the pursuit of a better version of myself. And I think for you too.
I love it. Yeah, I when I have a milestone, I always try to create a special occasion around it. When I've interviewed some of my heroes, for example, Jimmy Carr, I bawled out on the hotel that I stayed at, and I bought a bottle of champagne for afterwards. And I took my little sister down with me, who's my best friend in the world, and we grew up watching him on a small TV. And we created an experience, an occasion around that. And I think more people should marinate in their rewards because life will show them reasons to why they shouldn't. Life is full of upset and discourse and suffering. But if something good happens to you because of your hard work, you should marinate in it like a fucking meatball. You should find reasons to feel good about
Yeah,
yourself and your work because you'll be reminded for reasons to why you shouldn't.
dude. Chris Williamson talked about on an episode of the podcast. This conversation is going to be you and me swapping aphorisms back and forth. I think we speak in freaking parables. Um, but Chris Williamson talked about on one of his episodes. For those of you that don't know, he hosts one of the top podcasts in the world, the Modern Wisdom Podcast. It's fantastic. He talked about how for like the first 25 years of his life, he didn't celebrate any of these milestones, 100,000 show subscribers, a million monthly listeners, or whatever they were. And he burned the fuck out. He decided, like, what was this all for? What's the point? I just keep chasing the next thing. And I found myself doing that. Like, I hit 100,000 on TikTok and then 500,000 and then 750. And I like wasn't, I just, someone would ask, like, what are you going to do to celebrate? And I go, figure out what the next thing is. That's not healthy. That is not a healthy way to live. Life is short. Relish in your accomplishments and then get back to work. But if you don't take time to sit in them, like Chris Williamson said, and be grateful for what you've done, you're eventually, maybe not today, maybe not next year, maybe not next 2 years, eventually you're going to hit a wall because you're going to find the pursuit of the thing just leaves you empty. Like you just get it and then you know what the feeling's like and then what? I'm going to do this again. It's a fucking rat race. And for me, like when I hit, for whatever reason, when the TikTok hit 1 million followers and it went from 999.9 to 1M, everything felt real. I was like, holy shit, that's a million fucking people. That is wild. And I was in a bar in Atlanta with some friends, and I just like put my phone down, and I just closed my eyes, and I just breathed, and I was like, just remember this, just sit in it. This is the coolest thing ever. Like I could get emotional talking about it. Like if you would have told me, not even a year and a half ago when I started, but a year ago when I was in it, when I had already quit my job, that this is where I would be, like a million followers, a nationally ranked podcast, like talking to you, a guy from Scotland, feeling inclined enough to reach out to me to hear anything I have to say, I would have laughed you out of the fucking room. And so it's so important, as you said earlier, to put yourself in the terrain of the gratitude and just fucking feel it. And in doing that, I'm only more on fire for more creating content. I'm more on fire for helping people. But if I wasn't celebrating those wins, I don't think that I would be.
I love that Hormozy quote. We're swapping aphorisms like Pokemon cards here, but Hormozy says something along the lines of, "You've already achieved goals that a previous version of you said would make you happy." And I try and marinate in that perspective quite a lot. I try and think of like broke young 8-year-old David living in a abusive alcoholism kind of household and think about what he was dreaming of in those early years. It was stability, it was my own home, it was education. It wasn't any of these incredible achievements. It wasn't speaking at Gymshark or having a podcast. And when I put myself in that perspective of like 8-year-old David, these super achievements to me feel 10 times the value of what they feel right now in the present moment. Like I talk about some of these opportunities, and you might too. Whether it's when you talk about how many people have viewed your recent reel or some of the messages you may have received, you can only really see it through your current lens, and it feels like business as usual. But when you do kind of revert to that childhood perspective, you realize how much of a luxury it is to be at our current point. And I would recommend a listener, regardless of where they are in their life, whether at university, they're working a 9 to 5 job, just take stock that they're achieving goals that a younger version of themselves had always dreamed of.
What is your take on that concept? This is something I've been marinating on a lot, man, is the inner child. We've all got one. Like somewhere deep and down inside of me is the 9-year-old boy that was like chubby and insecure and don't know why he got made fun of so much and had crooked teeth and really long shaggy hair that will never see the light of day on social media. Don't go on my Facebook and go back to 2009. Um, what when you really meditate on like your inner child and where you stand now, do you think that that inner child would be proud of you?
It's a great question. I think he would be excited that he's about to live the life that I am. I think he would tell me not to be so hard on myself. I think he would tell me to have more fun in the pursuit of the process. I think he would be proud. I think he would be delighted that he gets to become me one day. But equally, the thought of the inner child also makes me believe that my current actions, beliefs, and drive probably stem from him. I'm probably just a puppet on a string based on my childhood experiences as well. And it's probably easier to accept that than it is to renounce it and pivot it from my hamstring or my malady to my purpose. It would be easy for me to be a victim to some of the things that have happened to me as a kid and as a young person. But I think channeling it into something good, into social impact, to purpose, to helping others, is something that he would be proud of doing. Because I think when you are faced with childhood adversity, whether it is self confidence issues, as you may have mentioned, or whether it's a broken home or financial difficulty or divorce, or if you're through the care system, you do have that dichotomy of letting it define you and you can become a victim to it and use it as a get out of jail free card for not achieving your wildest ambitions. Or you can use it as red diesel or super fuel for your purpose and become that narrative of it's not about where you come from, it's about where you're going. And that choice can be elective. Of course, there's loads of child psychology and neuroscience that underpins how people kind of traverse their adolescent development. But if you're conscious of it, you can make a choice. And I think I have made a choice to make it my superpower, not to sound all cliche, but I think there is a component of choice to it.
So do you think it's safe to say that to some degree, obviously there are extreme circumstances and scenarios, is it safe to say that at some point it comes down to making the choice to either succeed in spite of your circumstances or succumb to them?
There's an amazing quote that I love from a book that I'll recommend to the listener called Supernormal by Dr. Meg J, who's a previous guest of the podcast, a kind of child and adolescent psychologist. She quotes First Lady Abigail Adams and says, "When a young mind is animated by scenes that engage the heart, traits that would otherwise lay dormant awaken to life and form the character of the superhero." And that really resonated with me because it makes me feel like it's not elective. I can't really remember choosing to be ambitious, choosing to change my circumstances, but I think there was enough pain present to force that activation energy. And I think about Conor McGregor, for example, who has squandered his career over the last few weeks, if not few months, if not few years. And I think it's because he doesn't have that pain to motivate him any longer. He has achieved and cushioned Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He doesn't have to worry about food, shelter, safety, security. But then I think about Alex Pereira, for example, who only a number of years ago was an alcoholic in a favela watching Israel Adesanya call him out. And he was living as an alcoholic in squander. And that current environment is what pushed him to become the UFC light heavyweight champion of the world. So I think, yeah, long story short, if pain is present as a young person, I think there's opportunities or scenarios whereby it's not elective. It is a hygiene factor. It's a requirement. It's a survival tactic. And in my case, I think it was that. Either succumbed into child poverty and what I saw around me, or I made a change. And I think things were so bad that I was forced into that. And I think Chris Williamson talks about that with the region beta paradox that he talks about on Rogan, whereby the principle is if things are worse, they are better because it forces you to change.
Dude, yes. Oh my gosh, the region beta paradox. Thank you for calling that back into my conscience, dude. I was in that phase of my life for so many months. So for the listener, in short, there's a lot that I want to unpack about what you just said. I do agree with you about McGregor. I think that it sort of pays homage to the old quote that a man without purpose will distract himself in the throes of pleasure.
Or the quote, "The road to heaven feels like hell. The road to hell feels like heaven."
Yeah, exactly. He was poor. He was coming from nothing. He had a family to provide for. Now he's got it all, and he's kind of shitting the bed with drugs, alcohol, and adultery. But conversely, Perea is the great antithesis of that. Man, so the region beta paradox is basically, like you said, you would actually be, a lot of people would be better off in a worse circumstance because the action potential would be greater. So the examples that Chris Williamson uses is, oh, well, I'm in just like an okay relationship. They don't necessarily satisfy all of my needs, but they're good enough. They're safe. And the idea of being alone is a big risk. And I don't know if I'll ever find better than this, but it's okay. It's 70% there. Or this job pays me pretty well. I feel like I might be able to make more, but I'm scared to quit. In reality, you'd be better off broke You'd be better off in an abusive, toxic, poisonous, cancerous relationship because the odds of you changing would be better. And in my personal life, a few months back, like that's where I was living. Like I had a six-figure job that wasn't necessarily filling me up, but I was also starting to do this thing on the internet that was like lighting me on fire. And it was hard to leave. I agonized over whether or not to quit my job for months. Um, Same with the relationship. You know, we were fine. We were never great. We were never what I completely wanted, and on either end. And it's the amount of time that people will waste sitting in those positions. I say that as someone who did is terrifying. It's remarkable and it's terrifying. Like I would have some points in my life wished I was in a worse circumstances, so I would have moved faster. I'm so glad you brought that up.
For people that are tuning into this, for example, whereby they have a very comfortable life across all domains, they're healthy, they have a stable job, they're in a happy relationship, and their family are doing well. However, they're aspirational, they want to improve their life. They know they have just as much potential as they have proof. How can they activate the same energy? Because not everyone's going to quit their rental agreement tonight and go sleep homeless. They're not going to quit their job so they're hungry tonight. Life is such as that most people are doing okay. However, people still want more. How can they tap into that dog mindset, Michael?
My immediate answer would be through clarity. I think people, you're exactly right. People all over the world generally are doing okay. But a lot of those people who are doing okay claim they want more. But if you go one layer deeper than that, what does more look like? They don't know. Oh, more money. Okay. How much more? Oh, more fulfilling job. Okay. What fulfills you? A lot of people haven't sat down and really gotten clear on what it is that they want. And in my, I think it's episode 28 of my podcast, I uploaded it as a podcast, but it's a talk that I gave at Georgia State University here in Atlanta, Georgia. And I have this exercise that I put the one-on-one clients I work with through called You 10.0. Like, what does the best version of you look like? My coach that I worked with at the time, Gabriel Pinto, has something called the purpose formula. It's very similar. The point is to sit in silence and solitude and think about it, like cut out life's distractions, cut out the bullshit, figure out in a room by myself, meditating on the thought of what does better or more look like, and then write it down and get as specific as you possibly can. Don't just get to, I want to make another 100 grand a year and I want to be happier. I want to make another 100 grand a year through taking on 3 side hustles that earn me 10 grand a month. Like, you have to really drill down. And then on the person you want to be, you don't just say, I want to be a happier person. You would say, okay, what does this person look like? Or they're probably physically fit. What does this person think like? They probably have a really positive internal dialogue with themselves and with the world around them. How does this person treat others? Probably pretty well, because a person that's really happy treats others with kindness, respect, and dignity. And you keep drilling down on the human being, all the personality traits, all the habits. You write that shit on paper, because people who write their goals down are 41% more likely to achieve them. That is a real fact. You can look it up. All you got to do is write it down. And then you have the whole map written out in front of you. And you go, oh, why don't I just either two things. One, you go, why don't I just start being that person? Why don't I be the person that thinks that way, talks that way, acts that way, moves that way, eats that way? Or you write that person down and you see how fucking far you are from that person you say you want to be, and it pisses you off enough to create action potential. Those are the two possible outcomes. That's my theory. That's what works for me. And that's why I do this, what some people would perceive as silly vision board that's over here to my left every year. It's like, I want to get as clear as I possibly fucking can so that my intention and my claims are staked hard in the ground of the universe and from my mouth to God's ears. And I know that I have a plan to get there. And if I'm not even close, it pisses me off enough that I want to work to get there.
Michael, this has been such an enjoyable podcast. It's been total self development, gym bro, self improvement to its core, and I've loved it. Self improvement was my gateway drug into podcasting, so it's good to go back to my roots. I've loved your content online, this no BS approach to developing and improving your life. You deserve your success, you deserve the impact that you've had. If you could leave the listener with one last aphorism, maybe an aphorism that you hold dearly that gets you through your current suffering, what would it be?
I want to dwell on that for a minute because it's a big question. Yeah, I've had a lot of trials and tribulations the last 6 months, and with my my dying father, a lot of really hard conversations um, about the next step for him, for us, for the family. But I keep showing up for myself, for them. I keep showing up, and that looks different. It looks like making the right choices when I know I really don't want to make the right one. Um, and no matter how shitty I feel, I know that if I can make the right choice, the me on the other side of the choice that I know is objectively right, no matter how hard it is to make, is a me that's more prepared to handle the adversities I'm facing. The aphorism that rings true for me is so simple. And the first time I heard it, it hit me in a way that I'll never forget. It's not even really the most profound one I think I know, but it's a simple quote. I think it's from Wayne Dyer. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at start to change. That changed everything for me, and it made me fully understand that life really is not what happens to us. It really is truly how we respond, which is something that that man sitting on the couch down there has instilled in me from the time I could hardly walk. It's just a different way to say the same thing. And the more I dive into aphorisms and Bible verses, the more I realize that my father, who's my best friend, was teaching me these things all along, just in his language. And I'm so grateful. But if you can embody that it is not what happens to you, it is your perspective and your vantage point on the thing that happens, you can take control of it. You can possibly change it, or you can at least better manage the situation that you've been placed in. I don't view the situation with my family and the suffering I've been through as anything other than an opportunity to minister someone or to help someone through it should they face it, heaven forbid, in the future. My suffering is someone else's blessing. My misery is my ministry. And it all comes from the fact that I'm very intentional about how I view everything that happens to me or for me in my life. So my closing aphorism would be, in everything that happens to you, challenge your own perspective. Don't necessarily take your first thought, your first word as bond. Challenge it and try to spin it through a positive light, and it may start to change, and it might even start to change in your favor. That's what I'd leave them with.
Michael Smoak, everyone. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, brother. It was an absolute privilege and an honor.